What happens when a place the world once walked away from quietly becomes indispensable again? 3 decades after the last U.S. warship sailed from its docks, Subic Bay is no longer just a footnote in Cold War history. It's back, not as a sprawling permanent base, but as a nimble, high-value hub in a far more competitive Indo-Pacific chessboard. In an era defined by missile ranges, strategic choke points, and the speed of logistics, geography matters more than ever. And Subic sits right where the pressure converges. This revival isn't about nostalgia. It's about math and maps. Facing the South China Sea, anchored on Luzon's western coast, and commanding sea lanes carrying a third of global trade, Subic offers what modern deterrence demands: proximity without permanence. As U.S.-China competition heats up, Subic's deep harbor, industrial infrastructure, and access to the northern and western Philippine approaches make it ideal for distributed operations, rapid resupply, and alliance interoperability. But to grasp its true significance, you have to zoom out. Across the region, nations are rethinking old geography for new realities. Japan is fortifying its southwestern islands. Australia is expanding northern ports for rotational access. Singapore has positioned itself as a crucial logistics hub without hosting permanent foreign bases. Subic fits the same pattern, with one key difference. It sits closest to the most contested waters in Asia, where gray zone coercion, maritime lawfare, and near-daily confrontations are the new normal. For the Philippines, Subic's comeback signals a strategic awakening. Geography is no longer a vulnerability, it's leverage. Defense modernization, expanded alliance access, and a focus on maritime domain awareness are turning former commercial and civilian spaces into dual-use assets. Subic is at the center of that transformation, a logistics hub, an industrial base, and a strategic signal that Philippine territory will no longer be an empty chessboard. The implications are clear. Subic Bay's resurgence is deliberate and enduring. It reflects the convergence of U.S. distributed deterrence strategy, China's expanding gray zone pressure, and Manila's pivot toward alliance-enabled defense. Subic is no longer a Cold War relic. It's a modern strategic linchpin, quietly reshaping how power is projected, sustained, and contested across the Indo-Pacific. At its peak, Subic Bay wasn't just a base. It was the engine of American naval power in the Western Pacific. By the late Cold War, it supported over 60,000 U.S. personnel and civilian workers, ran one of the world's largest overseas naval repair complexes, and stored millions of barrels of fuel alongside massive ammunition depots. Its deepwater harbor could handle aircraft carriers and submarines alike, enabling rapid turnaround and sustaining operations thousands of miles from the U.S. mainland. That capacity translated directly into wartime impact. During the Korean War, Subic anchored UN naval logistics. In Vietnam, its tempo skyrocketed. Hundreds of U.S. ships cycled through each year for repair, resupply, and crew rest. Subic compressed distance, reduced transit times, and turned geography into a strategic advantage. Then, in the early 1990s, it unraveled, seemingly forever. In 1991 to 1992, the Philippine Senate said no to renewing the U.S. base agreement. Sovereignty concerns, shifting politics, and the post-Cold War belief that great power rivalry had eased sealed the decision. By 1992, the last U.S. Navy ship had left, ending nearly a century of American presence. What disappeared wasn't just foreign troops, it was an entire maritime ecosystem. Repair docks, fuel depots, supply chains, and skilled local labor that had quietly underwritten regional stability. Economically, the transition was a success. Subic transformed into the Subic Bay Freeport Zone, attracting global manufacturing, shipping, and logistics firms, creating more than 150,000 civilian jobs within 2 decades. Trade and investment steadily climbed, and the conversion became a textbook example of post-base redevelopment. Strategically, though, the story was different. As U.S. forces withdrew and maritime competition grew, especially after the 2000s, the Philippines lost a forward logistics anchor at a moment when persistent naval presence, rapid response, and sustainment depth were becoming critical. That strategic gap, largely underestimated at the time, would shape Philippine security decisions for decades. Some places matter for politics, some matter for promises. Subic Bay matters because of physics. Its value begins with geography, unique, unmovable, and nearly impossible to replicate elsewhere in the Philippines. Subic is one of Southeast Asia's finest natural deepwater harbors. Its depth, shelter, and approach channels allow aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, and heavy logistics vessels to operate without dredging or artificial expansion. That matters in wartime, when ports must function under pressure, damage, and tight timelines. Unlike many regional facilities that rely on long piers and constant maintenance, Subic's harbor was shaped by nature for naval-scale operations. It worked during the Cold War, and it works again today. Geography multiplies that advantage. Subic is roughly 220 kilometers from Scarborough Shoal, one of the most contested flashpoints in the South China Sea, and about 1,000 kilometers from Taiwan, roughly an hour's flight for modern military aircraft. From Subic, forces can access the northern Luzon corridor, the West Philippine Sea, and the approaches to the Luzon Strait without crossing choke points or relying on foreign bases. Few places in the region combine access and flexibility like that. Subic isn't just real estate, it's leverage. It sits directly on sea lines that carry energy, raw materials, and manufactured goods between Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Indian Ocean. In a crisis, whoever can protect, sustain, or disrupt these routes wields enormous influence. Subic doesn't need permanent combat forces to matter. Its value is movement, sustainment, and resilience under pressure. That's how modern militaries think about basing today. As one former U.S. Indo-Pacific command planner put it, Subic Bay isn't about hosting forces. It's about enabling them to move, sustain, and survive in contested space. In an era of precision missiles and relentless surveillance, static megabases are liabilities. Geography that supports dispersion, logistics depth, and rapid turnover is power. Subic Bay delivers exactly that. It didn't regain relevance because of nostalgia. It returned because pressure returned to Philippine waters, and it's here to stay. Its resurgence reflects three converging forces: persistent Chinese maritime coercion, a fundamental shift in U.S. force posture, and Manila's quiet but decisive strategic pivot. The immediate trigger is China's behavior at sea. Chinese Coast Guard vessels and maritime militia now maintain near-continuous presence around Philippine-claimed features, turning occasional confrontations into a constant state of tension. The method is deliberate: sustained proximity, low-intensity intimidation, and the slow normalization of control, coercion by repetition rather than outright force. Scarborough Shoal shows the stakes. Since 2012, this feature, inside the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, has been effectively controlled by China, highlighting how quickly access can vanish when maritime presence isn't maintained. That lesson reshaped Philippine planning. Response times, logistics depth, and western seaboard defenses all came under scrutiny. Subic Bay suddenly mattered again. At the same time, U.S. strategy was evolving. The Navy and Marine Corps are moving away from large, fixed bases toward distributed operations designed to survive inside China's missile envelope. In this new model, logistics nodes, ports that enable movement, repair, and sustainment without permanent basing, are as decisive as combat units. Subic fits that model perfectly. Under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, expanded to 9 sites in 2023 to 2024, U.S. access in the Philippines is rotational and modular. Subic Bay isn't formally an EDCA site, but it's increasingly treated as a high-value logistics and sustainment hub. It supports naval operations, humanitarian missions, and rapid force movement, all without the political costs of a permanent base. For the Philippines, this fits a larger strategic recalibration. Public confidence in the U.S. as a security partner now exceeds 80%, fueled by concerns over Chinese actions in the West Philippine Sea. Yet Manila remains economically tied to Beijing. Subic provides a middle path, strong deterrence through enablement, not escalation through permanent presence. In short, Subic is back because the old equilibrium collapsed. China made sustained presence unavoidable. U.S. strategy made flexible logistics essential. Philippine policy made alliance enablement politically viable. Subic Bay sits at that intersection, not as a relic of the past, but as a practical solution to today's challenges. And this is no abstract idea. Subic is being rebuilt, poured in concrete, wired with logistics systems, quietly integrated into allied planning. What's emerging is not a Cold War-style base, but a modern enablement platform built for speed, resilience, and political sustainability. At its heart is U.S. logistics infrastructure deliberately designed to respect Philippine constitutional limits. A $100+ million climate-controlled storage and maintenance facility, covering roughly 25,000 square meters, is slated for completion by September 2026. It won't house combat forces. Instead, it will store vehicles, humanitarian equipment, and maritime sustainment assets. The logic is simple. Pre-positioned capability, not troops. In a crisis, forces can flow in quickly. In peacetime, the footprint remains low profile. Running alongside this is Subic's industrial revival. The former Hanjin shipyard, now Aguila Subic under HD Hyundai Heavy Industries with U.S. investment, has turned the bay into one of Southeast Asia's most capable naval repair hubs. Destroyers, frigates, amphibious ships, and potentially even aircraft carriers can be serviced here. In a world where forward repair capacity can be as decisive as firepower, this is a game changer. Every day a ship avoids a long trip back to Japan, Guam, or Hawaii is a day gained in operational tempo. Allies have noticed. The French Navy has publicly identified Subic as a key support hub for its carrier strike group and amphibious deployments. That endorsement matters. France operates globally and selects logistics nodes carefully. Subic's inclusion signals it is no longer just a Philippine or U.S. asset. It's a shared enabler for coalition operations from the Indian Ocean to the Western Pacific. For the Philippines, Subic is once again an operational anchor. The Philippine Navy has re-established forward facilities to support its growing fleet of modern frigates and offshore patrol vessels, shortening deployment cycles to the West Philippine Sea and improving sustainment for continuous maritime presence. Portions of Subic's former airfield are being refurbished for maritime patrol and surveillance, reinforcing its role as a joint sea-air node rather than a single-service enclave. Exercises tie it all together. Drills like Exercise Sama-Sama regularly bring nearly 1,000 personnel from the Philippines, U.S., Japan, and other partners. These aren't ceremonial port calls. They integrate maritime warfare, logistics, command and control, and sustainment under realistic, contested conditions. Taken together, Subic's renewed role signals a deeper shift in Indo-Pacific power projection. It's no longer about flying the biggest flag over a base. It's about moving forces faster, repairing ships closer to the fight, sustaining partners under pressure, and doing all this without triggering political blowback. Subic Bay now does exactly that, quietly emerging as one of the region's most consequential logistics and industrial nodes. Subic strengthens deterrence in a distinctly modern way. By prioritizing sustainment over permanent combat forces, It lets allies operate closer to contested waters without creating fixed, high-visibility targets. This posture complicates coercion, shortens response times, and remains politically sustainable. Equally important, Subic enhances alliance interoperability, shared logistics standards, faster intelligence handoffs, and rehearsed crisis response pathways. Coalition presence shifts from episodic coordination to routine capability. Its revival reinforces the credibility of the Mutual Defense Treaty, reaffirmed by Washington in 2023 as covering attacks in the South China Sea. Dual-use infrastructure, ports, storage, maintenance, airfield support, deepens operational integration while keeping Philippine control intact. The alliance is advancing not through permanent bases, but through access, readiness, and shared enablement. Beijing's reaction has been predictable. China criticizes these expanded access arrangements as destabilizing and warns of strategic consequences, signaling that logistics hubs like Subic are now part of the deterrence equation. At home, debates continue in the Philippines over sovereignty, environmental impact, and fears of becoming a frontline state. These concerns don't erase Subic's strategic value, but they shape how quickly and how far integration can proceed. Policy reforms now promote domestic defense manufacturing, and Subic is poised to capture that upside. New facilities are projected to create 200 to 300 skilled technical jobs, with ripple effects in logistics, engineering, and maritime services. Over time, this strengthens local capacity, enhancing readiness without relying solely on external supply chains. Subic's deep harbor also offers diversification. As congestion and geopolitical risks strain traditional hubs, Subic provides an alternative gateway to Manila for Indo-Pacific trade and ship repair. That redundancy is vital in a region where disruptions, whether natural disasters or political crises, are no longer rare. By hosting logistics infrastructure instead of permanent combat units, Manila bolsters deterrence while minimizing domestic pushback. This approach preserves flexibility. Access can scale up in a crisis and scale down in peacetime, maintaining public support without sacrificing readiness. The Philippine Constitution restricts permanent foreign bases without Senate approval. That limit is real, enduring, and deliberate, forcing innovation toward rotational access and pre-positioning rather than permanence. Historical memory of U.S. bases still shapes public skepticism, especially among nationalist groups. Transparency, environmental safeguards, and Philippine control over facilities are not optional. They are essential for legitimacy. Subic strengthens deterrence, but it also increases exposure in any regional contingency, whether involving Taiwan or the South China Sea. That risk is geographic reality. The question is whether it's managed with capability and partners or absorbed without leverage. Subic Bay's comeback captures the essence of 21st century Indo-Pacific security. Logistics, geography, and alliances now matter as much as firepower. No longer a Cold War monolith, Subic has transformed into a flexible sustainment and industrial hub, aligned with distributed deterrence. More broadly, Subic demonstrates how legacy geography adapts to new competition, how ports built for permanence can be repurposed for resilience. As U.S.-China rivalry deepens, Subic signals how the Philippines balances sovereignty, alliance commitments, and regional stability. Today, it stands as one of the most strategically revealing ports in the Indo-Pacific. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of today's pressing geopolitical issues.